Prepare it. So I said, Kunja Vihari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Padmahamsa Parvajikacharya Shri Shri Mad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna, thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Guyuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Bitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Dhapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. So we're on Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text 3. Is that correct? 4. Really? Okay. I thought in your thing you had said 3. Maybe I read it wrong.
Maybe it got changed. I don't know, you can do 3 again.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Because Hari Vilas came and gave class on Sunday. And it messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't send you the new one.
Okay. Yeah, it's, on your thing it says 323. Maybe.
I switched it. I didn't send it out.
What's that?
I switched it, but I didn't send it out.
Oh, okay.
To you properly. I don't know.
Yeah, I have the original version. All right. Anyway, we'll move it over to what it should be. Is this the right thing? 3.2.4. Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Krishnang gri sudhaya brusham. Krishnang gri sudhaya brusham. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Krishnangri sudhayabrasham. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Krishnangri sudhayabrasham. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha.
Muhurtam adbhutushni.
Samuhurtam abhutushni.
Krishnangri sudhaya brisham.
Krishnangri sudhayabrasham. Tivrena bhakti yogena.
Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha.
Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Krishnangri sudhayabrasham. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Krishnangri sudhayabrasham. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Lady? Lady? Samuhurtam abhutushnim. Krishnangri sudhayabrasham. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Nimagna sadhu nirvritaha. Saham Uddhava. Muhurtam. For a moment. Abhut. Became. Tushnim. Dead silent. Krishna Angrihi. The lotus feet of the Lord. Sudhaya. By the nectar. Brisham. Well matured. Tivrena. By very strong. Bhakti yogena. Devotional service. Nimagnaha. Absorbed in. Sadhu. Good. Nirvritaha. Fully in love. The translation reads, for a moment he remained dead silent, and his body did not move. He became absorbed in the nectar of remembering the Lord's lotus feet in devotional ecstasy. And he appeared to be going increasingly deeper into that ecstasy. So I say, and you please repeat, for a moment, he remained dead silent, and his body did not move. He became absorbed in the nectar of remembering the Lord's lotus feet in devotional ecstasy. And he appeared to be going increasingly deeper into that ecstasy. So here's the purport. On the inquiry by Vidura about Krishna, Uddhava appeared to be awakened from slumber. He appeared to regret that he had forgotten the lotus feet of the Lord. Thus, he again remembered the lotus feet of the Lord and remembered all his transcendental loving service unto him. And by so doing, he felt the same ecstasy that he used to feel in the presence of the Lord. Because the Lord is absolute, there is no difference between his remembrance and his personal presence. Thus, Uddhava remained completely silent for a moment, but then he appeared to be going deeper and deeper into ecstasy. Feelings of ecstasy are displayed by highly advanced devotees of the Lord. There are 8 kinds of transcendental changes in the body: tears, shivering of the body, perspiration, restlessness, throbbing, choking of the throat, etc. And all these were manifest by Uddhava in the presence of Vidura. Samuhurtam abhutushnim krishnang grihesu dayabrasham tivrena bhakti yogena nimagna sadhu nirvrtaha. For a moment he remained dead silent, and his body did not move. He became absorbed in the nectar of remembering the Lord's lotus feet in devotional ecstasy. And he appeared to be going increasingly deeper into that ecstasy. So, both of these verses, the verse that I just read, 3.2.4, and its previous verse, which is one that I made some investigation about today to speak on, both talk about remembering the Supreme Lord. And the sojourn through this world, we were focusing on Vidura, and now we're also focusing on Uddhava. So both Uddhava and Vidura are very exalted devotees. As we have learned already, that Uddhava was much younger than Vidura, and that's why ultimately when Vidura asks Uddhava to hear the contents of the Uddhava Gita, Uddhava defers to Maitreya, who will be living nearby or staying nearby. And that's when Vidura will leave and go and meet with Maitreya and hear from him, because Maitreya was also there to hear various topics related by Krishna. So this world appears solid, and in general we take it at face value, but in fact it's not. And we were hearing about Uddhava traveling through various places on pilgrimage when he was ousted from the palace at Hastinapur. So Vidura left the palace at Hastinapur, and he traveled through various places, through Ayodhya, through other places, Mathura, Dwarka. He traveled also into Western India. And then he connected back up with Uddhava at Prabhasa, or in that vicinity. So when a person detaches themselves and travels throughout the world, simply seeing things go on in this world and recognizing that what is happening is like a giant carnival, or like a giant amusement park, or a giant virtual reality. There are various rides and various people are engaging with various activities. And while a person is engaged, a common person is engaged with their various activities in the material world, they assume this to be reality, factual. But in fact, these things are not true. And this is the idea of the Pilgrim's Progress that Vidura engaged in. He was rather visiting holy places of pilgrimage, seeing the Archamurti, the forms of the Lord in various holy places. And he was meditating on the actual reality. And this is something that we all have to do. We all have to recognize that we may have duties and responsibilities, and some of us may have families. But in the ultimate issue, all these things are part of a virtual reality that exists in the material world, because we are not the bodies that we're in now. The relationships we have with people based on our bodies are also not factual. And one day they will all be realized for what they are, an elaborate array of names and like players in a chess game or on some other kind of thing. Everything is going on virtually. So in Bhagavad Gita we have nasato vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate sataha ubayara api drishtontas tvanayos tatpadarshivi. That the sages have concluded that of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the existent there is no cessation. This sages have concluded by studying the nature of both. Of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the existent there is no cessation. So we are eternal. Our consciousness is eternal, but everything connected with this body is temporary. And we hear that, and as we continue in Krishna consciousness, we will come to realize that deeper and deeper. There was a nice song that was composed by two devotees, Jeffrey Armstrong, whose original devotee name was Jamadagnya. Now he goes by the name of Indra Armstrong or something like that. And Mangalananda, who, of course, you know, is the bard of the ISKCON movement at one point, or the guitar man. So this was a very interesting poem, which I think captures it. That it was done in a kind of a folk style by Mangalananda. Outworn, my shoes are growing thin through trackless miles of needless sin. In land where only cactus grows, I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. In countless births I vainly sought escape from death, but I was caught. Within a trap which I had chose, I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. O cold, mechanic, desert night, I'm not your child, I've seen the light. No more to wear your dusty clothes. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. So many times the moon rose high and filled with light the darkened sky. Yet I my foolish eyes would close. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. But every day when dawn appeared, its light revealed that which I feared. A land of death besieged with woes. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. O cold mechanic desert night, I'm not your child, I've seen the light. No more to wear your dusty clothes. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. But then at last I came to see this desert life was meant for me. But happiness just comes and goes. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. Now finally, Lord, I hear your song. My soul was sleeping all along. No more your love will I oppose. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. Now let my every word and deed be free from anger, lust, and greed. For each man's heart his action shows. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. Oh, let my chanting fill the skies, so love for you may fill my eyes. Let serving you be my repose. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. O cold mechanic desert night, I'm not your child. I've seen the light. No more to wear your dusty clothes. I feel the thorn, I've smelt the rose. So we travel through this world, and this same idea is there in 6th chapter of 1st canto, where we hear about Nard Muni, who was a young boy, and his father was dead or deserted or something like that. And his mother was bitten by a snake, and his mother died, and he had the audience of the Bhaktivedantas, the sages who were staying where he was. And then he began to travel, and it says he traveled over plains and valleys, through agricultural fields, mining installations. He traveled from one side to the other, all alone as a small boy. So he traveled just like Vidura traveled. Of course, he was just a small boy at the time. And, you know, we hear that he went to Vrindavan, and there he meditated, and the Supreme Lord appeared in his heart, and his body was surcharged with ecstatic feeling and emotion. But then it disappeared, and he sat down and tried to reiterate and reconnect, but he couldn't do it. And then he heard that this would not happen again for him in this lifetime. So this idea of recognizing that this world is always offering us some kind of thing to engage in, some activity, some type of goal, some achievement, some accolade, some accomplishment. And for the most part, people just follow these ideas. They go from one to another, and they never recognize that their time is ticking by, and that life will one day be finished. And when it is, whatever we've won in this material world, whatever we've accomplished, whatever is attached to our name or to our body, there will be no more. We will lift up from this body. We will never be that person again. We will never have those, that money, that fame, that whatever it was. So we are on a pilgrim's journey, on a world which we sometimes feel the thorn and we sometimes smell the rose. And someone who engages in the process of Krishna consciousness gradually begins to change their perspective. And after some time, you are like a witness. You're traveling through the world, and you're seeing people get married. You're seeing children struggling to learn their ABCs. You see people struggling to set up some occupation. You see social and political movements come and go. You see the everyday interaction of people in everyday life, shopping, raising a family, tending the family car, paying off the mortgage, buying insurance of various types. And then we see the activities of older people, struggling to remember where they placed their keys, trying to figure out what to do with the day, dealing with various health issues, oftentimes living in some old age home. And this is the chessboard. This is what the material world is. It's a collection of these little rides, these little vignettes, these little situations. And we take them very seriously. And we identify with them. And when we die, we realize that it could have been a movie. We could have been sitting in a movie. And that movie could be over, and we could go into the next, theater and see a different movie. And just as the characters in the movie were not us, these characters that we now connect with are also not us, at least on the material plane. So this is why we try to learn, this desert life is not for me. This mechanical world with all of its virtual setups, all of its virtual relationships, all of its virtual goals and achievements, all of it. It comes and goes. Nasato vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate sataha, ubayar api drishton tas tranayos tadarshivi. So whoever we are struggling to hear the holy name, which gradually purifies us of this idea. We may understand and accept the responsibilities of being a family member. We may accept the responsibilities of being in a particular nation, owing certain responsibilities to our country, to our state, to our local region, to our ethnic group, et cetera, et cetera. We may acknowledge these, but all the time we realize that none of these have any real permanent connection with who we are. They are only temporary. And that's why, although we may resolve or make an effort to fulfill various obligations that we have, we understand that in one sense they're secondary. And the main obligation we have is to lift off in the airplane of human consciousness, just like in an aircraft. When you get to the end of the runway, you better be ready to take off. Otherwise, you're going to crash into the forest, And that's what usually people do. They're going down the runway in their airplane, but they never plan to take off. They just reach the end of the runway and, because they're not taking off, they crash. And what that means is another birth, another lifetime, another go around, another throw of the dice, another term in some family, somewhere, in some body, undergoing some type of arrangement of politics, ethics, ethnicity, some kind of arrangement of religious background, some kind of arrangement of finance and all those things. And this is what Bhagavatam and the great sages are trying to wake us up from, this consciousness, this type of thinking. And there is another world, as Uddhava here is talking about, and as we hear that Uddhava momentarily leaves this one and enters that one. And this is kind of sometimes a mysterious thing, that we hear that there are 9 stages of devotional service: ado, shraddha, tatu, sadhu, sangha, tabhajana, nivritti, tabhajana kriya, to nivrittis cha, nishtha, tatasta, let's see, ado, shraddha, tata, sadhu, sango, tabhajana kriya, ha, anartha, nivrittis, hyat, nishta, ruchis, tataha, ata, shakti, tatabhavas, tata, prema budanchati sadha kanam ayam premna pradurbhave bhavet kramaha. So there is Shraddha, which is the basic faith one has in devotional service. Tatu sadhu sangha leads to stage 2, associating with devotees. Bhajana kriya, stage 3, initiation, purifying of anarthas. Then 4 is anartha nivritti, when the anarthas are mostly destroyed. 5 is nishta, or steadiness. Then 6 is ruchi, or taste. 7 is atashaktis, which is beginning sense of our eternal relationship with the Supreme, or attachment. Then there is bhava, which is preliminary love for Godhead. And the 9th one is prema, which is highest stage of love of Godhead. So these stages could be likened to different places on the runway as the airplane is taking off from the landing strip. So when we're getting to atashaktis, at that point, the airplane is rotating. They call it in aviation rotation, V2, where at that point, there's no question of aborting the takeoff. You've got to take off, because if you don't, you'll crash. So you rotate and you rise up into the sky at that point. And in that situation, you start to lead almost 2 lives at the same time. You're in the material world, dealing with everyday people in an everyday world, but at the same time, you may be also experiencing already your relationship with the Supreme in the spiritual world, as Uddhava is doing here. And we hear this kind of thing taking place when we hear about the great devotees. Gaurikishore Das Babaji would oftentimes completely eschew wanting to be away from people, because oftentimes he felt that people would come to him and just want some kind of material benediction. And he was very impatient with this kind of mentality. So he didn't want to be with such people. And that's why at one point he elected to move next to a latrine where the smell was so awful that he knew that people wouldn't bother him there. Mundane people wouldn't go anywhere near it. So he was saved from their company. And sometimes, while in the company of people who sometimes well-wishers, sometimes regular devotees, he would just start talking in a way that they couldn't comprehend at all, because he was actually experiencing something going on somewhere else in one case. Someone asked him some question, and instead of answering the question, he took a stick and started banging it on the ground and saying, "Get away, get away!" And, the people in the audience didn't know what to think of. And he was somewhere else, but he was seeing a goat eating tulsi leaves in Vrindavan. He was trying to get the goat to get away from the tulsi leaves. And, he was in another world. And this appears to be also Uddhava, when he heard this thing, this question from Vidura. At first, he couldn't answer because it reminded him of Krishna. Then he went deeper. Then he was in his relationship with Krishna in another world, in the spiritual world, which also exists. It's right here, right now, but unfortunately, we don't see it. We don't have any connection with it. It's right here, right now. But if we had the right heart, we could immediately connect with it. And that's what we're actually developing the ability to do through the process of Krishna consciousness. We can connect with it. So suddenly he clicked out or disappeared from this world, although apparently still within his body. And then he comes back, and he's prepared to talk with Vidura about spiritual topics. And we see this kind of thing in a lot of situations. Even sometimes Prabhupada would be asked a question, and he would appear just to be not present for a few moments, and then once again re-enter the present situation on the mundane material level. Generally speaking, devotees do not make a show of this. Of course, in India, there's a whole class of people, pseudo-spiritualists, who make a business out of apparently demonstrating these great mysterious connections with the other world. But true devotees usually try to play these things down, or to try to somehow play down the ecstatic symptoms. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we read that there are these various ecstatic symptoms: horripilation, the skin, bumping up. We call it goose pimples in English. There is hair standing on the head, inability to speak, sometimes faltering of the voice. We hear that there is tears flowing from the eyes, sometimes total inability to move. These are ecstatic symptoms, ashta sattvika vikara. So there are various ecstatic symptoms, and those people who have gone beyond, ruchi or taste, and are now at stage 7, 8, or 9 in Atta Shakti, or stage bhava, or stage prema, these various symptoms can come upon them. And when we experience or see someone with these symptoms, then we can understand what's going on. And we can also sometimes understand whether these symptoms are simply being manufactured by someone who simply wants some cheap praise, or they're genuine symptoms. And even those who are not on the highest stage can sometimes demonstrate some of these symptoms to a moderate or modest extent. These can be there, and this is the penumbra, or the beginning stages of highest ecstasies, which can come and then they disappear. And then one has to, again, continue with devotional service. So devotional service gradually purifies the heart enough so that we can understand what these stages are like. And of course, the nectar devotion, there is a whole section of the nectar devotion that describes in great detail this whole progress that one makes beyond ordinary sadhana bhakti to the stage we call raganuga bhakti, which is a sort of middle stage. And then there's a ragatmika bhakti, where one is actually experiencing these emotions in a genuine and complete way. Whereas in sadhana bhakti, we are not experiencing any great depth of spiritual emotion, but rather we are beginning to experience the purifying effect of sadhana bhakti. And in the middle stage, the raganuga bhakti, where we're following the acharyas, we're beginning to experience intermittently some of these various ecstasies and realities of those who are living in two worlds, of living in this world, in the material world, and simultaneously living in the spiritual dimension, already to some extent engaged in their eternal activity, their internal relationship with the Supreme. All right, so I'll stop at that point and see if there are any questions or comments anyone has about, or realizations that you have about this verse or this topic. Yeah.
Uddhava was forgotten about the activities of the connection that he has with.
That what?
how has he forgotten
He forgot what?
Krishna?
Oh, right, right. Well, come see, come saw. He forgot, or he, in one sense, didn't forget, you know. The issue is that great devotees may be focused on Krishna in the sense of a pastime, or a great devotee may be focused on Krishna in the sense of understanding his glories, or a devotee may be focused on Krishna in the sense of performing service for Krishna. These are all remembering Krishna. But I think that what this indicates really is that Uddhava went from remembering Krishna in the sense of service to remembering Krishna in the sense of his qualities and pastimes. You know? So he had forgotten Krishna in the sense of his qualities and pastimes, but he was actually totally, enraptured in engaging in Krishna's service. So for devotees on a very high level, they try to remember Krishna constantly, you know, as we sing every morning rather. What's that stanza that Shri Radhika Madhaveyor Apara Madhura Lila Guna Rupa Namnam Pratikshana Svadana Lolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam, you know. Shri Radhika Madhaveyor Apara. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. So that's the fifth verse of our Mangalartik song, you know. Shri Radhika Madhaveyor Apara Madhura Lila Guna Rupa Namnam Pratikshana Svadana Lolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam. And the spiritual master aspires to relish the qualities, names, and pastimes. So he always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes. So he's hearing or reading and chanting about the unlimited conjugal pastimes, and he is also thinking about their qualities, names, and pastimes, because those go along with it. Those are different categories. Usually we talk about the Supreme as Nam, Gun, Rup, and Lila. So we have the name of the Supreme, we have the Rup, or the form of the Supreme, Guna, the qualities of the Supreme, and Lila, which is the activities of the Supreme. And generally speaking, in the process of purification, we start at the Nam, the name, the holy name, and that eventually gives us access to the Rup, the form of the Supreme. And then after that, the next installment is the Guna. We become personally able to experience the qualities of the Supreme. And finally, Lila, that's the last one, that's the highest one. So, as the last line states, the spiritual master is eager to hear and chant about these at every moment. So the spiritual master then goes from one to the other, and finally to Lila, where one becomes absorbed in Lila. And to some extent, this process is described in the Nectar of Devotion, where we learn about how someone eventually becomes sort of, not intermittently, but sort of permanently submerged in the Leela of the Supreme. So it starts off somewhat intermittently, and then it gradually thickens, and it's described like sugar candy, that you have sugar cane, then you have the liquid that comes out of the sugar cane, then after that you have this brownish substance, then after this finally you get to the point where it's crystal clear, and it's rock candy, which is considered the highest, most refined aspect of sugar. And in a similar way, it's described that these various relationships or these various experiences are something like that, where it goes from rougher, more, not quite so full, not quite so pure, not quite so steady. It gets steadier, it gets purer, and it gets much more refined and becomes sugar candy, so it works like that. And I think this is kind of what's indicated here by Vidura, or rather Uddhava, or it being said about him that he remembered Krishna, so he went from, I think, remembering Krishna, because I'm sure he always thought of Krishna, but he thought of him in the sense of he was engaged in his service, or he was engaged in talking with a devotee, namely Vidura, and then he suddenly switched over to remembering Krishna directly in a Leela mode, in that kind of mode. That's how I would reply to that question. Yes.
I have kind of like a trivia question that I've always been wondering. So it's talking about the Ashtasavika Bhavas.
Yeah.
And I've heard that it's basically when the like Krishna consciousness, or like, the energy coming from Shuddha Sattva or something like that comes into the body and affects one of the elements, and which element it affects causes a specific one. And I was just wondering if you've ever gone through each of the elements and what they actually produce, or what element relates to which. Like if you're choking up, it's this, or like crying, I think would be water, something like that.
That's interesting. I've never heard that or read about it, but what's the source of that? Where did you come across it? Somebody said it, or it's written somewhere?
Someone was giving a nectar devotion seminar. I heard something like that, but they...
Yeah, it could easily be. I've never run across it, so...
That's like the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
I think it's another...
There's a lot of those kind of interesting things when you get into it. The more you read, the more details. It's just endless details in learning about the process of Krishna consciousness. We learn more and more, and as you do, it gives you more and more of a feeling that no one could make this up. This is just too over the top. Every conceptual nook and cranny has some information about it from a devotional perspective. And we actually experience these things, that it's not just something we talk about. But I think most devotees, even beginning devotees, do get experiences or these little drops of pre-ecstasy, where suddenly something will happen and you are suddenly no longer in normal consciousness, and you didn't expect it. Suddenly you're in non-normal consciousness, and you realize that, oh, hey, this is all real, and then you pop back in, and next moment you're doing regular stuff again. But this is the nature of spiritual life, and this is described in the Harinam Chintamani, where we have, Nam Abbas, so Abbas is likened to before the sun comes up in the morning. You're standing out somewhere where it's flat, and there's no giant skyscrapers around, or no big mountains around. You see that there's no sun yet, but it's not dark anymore. So what's happening is the rays of the sun are just beginning to peek over the horizon, although the sun has not arisen. And this is called abhas, or closeness or nearness to spiritual realization, or in this case, nearness to seeing the sun rise. But when the sun actually rises, then it's far and away much more impressive than the beginning stages of some lightning on the horizon. So it's said that with the holy name it works in a similar way. As we gradually eliminate our offenses, we experience in deeper and deeper reality the full effect of the holy name. So the full effect of the holy name has the power to immediately, erase all of our material desires, to catapult us to a high level of spiritual awareness. And if we're actually very pure, we can begin to maintain that level. But for most of us, we might get a peek at that and then we go back down. That's the Abbas stage. So the beginning stage is usually Nam Aparad, we're making some offense, and there's Nam Abbas, which is the clearing stage, and finally Shuddhanam, which is the higher stage where we go to have a true chanting of the holy name without distraction, without some kind of forgetfulness, without some kind of offense. And in that way, then the holy name is like a volcano. It completely overpowers us. And this is what we hear about these kinds of ashta sattvika bhav, these various emotions, that they're overpowering, that we understand what human emotions are because we've experienced them in various situations that we've been in our everyday lives. But when you actually experience a transcendental emotion, it kind of just sort of knocks it off the table. It's so much more intense than any of those other things that it's in a whole different category. I kind of liken it to one time I was on traveling Sankirtan, and I was with a devotee. We were somewhere in the Southwest, and the devotee wanted to see the Grand Canyon. And I thought it was just a waste of time, why are we going to go there? But he said, we're only like 20 miles away, so why don't we drive over there? So we drove over there. We got there at some real late point in the night. It was too dark. It was just the night was black, there's nothing going on there. So we rested, and then in the morning, we got up, and there it suddenly is, this giant thing, a huge chasm in the earth. And at the very bottom, there's a little river down there. And you can tell that this huge canyon must have been cut by water in some kind of way. And this tiny sort of finger of water snaking along at the bottom of the canyon is just like a joke compared to the size of the Grand Canyon. But to me, it seems like that's what our everyday emotions are like, and the Grand Canyon is actually there. It could take volumes of water on the volume of the ocean, So, but there's right now just this kind of little sliver of experience that we have, a little sliver of the emotions that we taste and experience. But with progressive Krishna consciousness, we will be eventually lifted through, as we were talking about, through bhajana kriya, lessening of anarthas, anartha nivrti, getting rid of anarthas, nishta, steadiness, ruchi, taste, and then finally atta shaktis, where the penetration of these more esoteric and intense states of emotion and reality start to peek through. And from atta shakti, there is bhava, and then finally prema. So these are the higher stages. This is just the progress of devotional service. This is how it works. As we become purified, as we take to the process, we, like Vidura, we start to leave the material world behind. We watch people doing things, and we recognize that we know why they're doing them, but they don't have any capture for us. They don't have any pull on our heart. And then not only do we not have a pull from the material side, we are starting to experience the pull from the spiritual side. And eventually we will be ushered back into the spiritual world. All right, so any final questions or comments? All right.
One small comment that reminded me. So if like we can sometimes experience a glimmer of these, and said sometimes it's because of the association of like more senior devotees that are more mature in advance, and they're like, it's like burning in them, and then some light is like coming in and hitting
Right.
our consciousness. So also we should be careful when we're dealing with other like people, like especially like Christians, like they'll have something in there that will like influence us if we're not careful. Like, you know, you just try to keep arguing with someone, and they're like, you know, this one lady was telling us, like, no matter what you tell them, the fundamentalists will never like not believe what they're telling you. So sometimes they can actually affect your shraddha and affect your thing if you're not really like fixed.
Yeah. Well, they have their, to some extent, people from other religious communities also have some connection with God. It can't be argued. But oftentimes, the thing that really distinguishes Krishna consciousness from other religions is the fact that we understand what offenses are. And generally in the other religions, people don't, you know. So they're quite happy to offend other people, you know, in so many different ways. And it's actually yesterday in the evening, I was looking at this video on Thomas Merton and the Trappist monks, you know, that this was an order of the Catholic tradition, which was started, I think, in the 12th century, and then went through some changes in the 16th century or something like that. And these monks, they live in a monastery, and their whole day is sadhana, you know, like what we would call sadhana. They get up at 3 o'clock. They have Vespers or something else they call it, which is their equivalent of Mongol Artik. Then they recite various prayers. Then there's a work part. Of course, they eat. And Trappist monks are vegetarian, by the way. Then throughout the entire day, they're going back and forth between, you know, some kind of remembrance and prayer and some kind of actual service where they're singing or communally doing something. The one thing that's missing is Sankirtan. They're not going out in the world. They're not actually trying to influence people. But they do almost the same thing every day. So the mind becomes very peaceful by a situation where you are remembering the Supreme Lord. So they're remembering the Supreme Lord in their way, and we're remembering the Supreme Lord in our way. And it's obvious that this has the effect on the mind. You know, it doesn't matter which religion you're doing it. If you're really trying to focus on the Supreme, it will have the same purifying effect. All right, so anyway, thank you all very much for your